Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you this. What if everything you believed about an alliance, about friendship between powerful nations, was suddenly called into question by tariffs, by pride, by geopolitics? We are living that moment now. At this very juncture, the relationship between two of the world's greatest democracies, long seen not merely as partners, but as partners in destiny, is being fundamentally altered. And not because of a war or a treaty, but because of economics, because of trade, because of sovereignty. The decision by the United States to impose 50% tariffs on a wide range of Indian exports has sent shockwaves through both economies and reshaped the contours of an already fragile relationship. What began as disagreements over energy, trade, and strategic autonomy has now escalated into a full-blown economic confrontation. The tariffs are not marginal adjustments. They represent a doubling of duties that directly strike at the heart of industries employing millions of Indians and supplying goods that have long found a comfortable market in the U.S. From garments and textiles to gems, jewelry, footwear, furniture, sporting goods, and chemicals, almost every sector that had previously enjoyed a competitive edge is now under pressure. For Indian exporters, this is not just about losing market share. It is about survival in an increasingly hostile trade environment. The official justification from Washington is straightforward. India's continued purchase of discounted Russian oil undermines Western sanctions and emboldens Moscow. By raising the cost of Indian goods, the U.S. believes it can exert enough economic pain to force a recalibration of New Delhi's foreign policy choices, but this is a miscalculation of the highest order. India has consistently made it clear that its strategic autonomy is non-negotiable. Energy security is not a luxury, it is a necessity for sustaining growth in a country of 1.4 billion people. Cheap Russian oil keeps inflation in check, lowers input costs for industries, and stabilizes domestic prices. To expect India to abandon that advantage under foreign pressure ignores both economic logic and political reality. The effects of these tariffs are already visible. Indian small and medium enterprises, especially in labor-intensive industries like garments and leather goods, face mounting cancellations of U.S. orders. Exporters are struggling to absorb the additional costs or to pass them on to buyers in a highly competitive market. Job losses are becoming an immediate concern in states heavily reliant on export-led manufacturing. Meanwhile, the Indian government has been forced to look for alternative markets, accelerating its outreach to Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia, while doubling down on domestic campaigns like Make in India and Vocal for Local. What Washington sees as pressure, New Delhi interprets as an opportunity to deepen economic self-reliance and reduce vulnerability to American leverage. From the American perspective, the tariffs are framed as a necessary assertion of strength, a reminder that access to the U.S. market comes with conditions, yet the collateral damage to American consumers and businesses is undeniable. Indian gems and jewelry dominate U.S. wedding and luxury markets, and the price spikes are already being felt. Similarly, in categories like furniture and sporting goods, importers are warning of shortages and higher costs, which ultimately punish ordinary U.S. households. What was intended as a strategic move risks becoming politically unpopular domestically. The real danger lies in the erosion of trust. For decades, U.S.-India relations have been built not only on shared democratic values, but on a gradual expansion of economic interdependence. These tariffs rip at the fabric of that partnership, signaling to India that Washington views the relationship through the narrow lens of compliance rather than collaboration. If India responds with countermeasures, as it has hinted by tightening rules on foreign products and urging citizens to boycott imports, the standoff could spiral into a prolonged trade war. And in the broader geopolitical theater, it sends a message to the world that even supposedly close partners can turn adversarial when interests clash. The trust that once underpinned U.S. India relations has begun to fray, giving way to an unmistakable divergence in strategic priorities. For years, the partnership was portrayed as a natural alliance of democracies, a counterweight to rising authoritarian powers and a cornerstone of stability in the Indo-Pacific. That narrative is now under strain. The imposition of tariffs, the disagreements over energy policy, and the broader clash of expectations have revealed something deeper than trade friction, a widening gap in how each country views the relationship and its purpose. Washington has long imagined India as a junior partner that would gradually align itself with U.S. strategic objectives, particularly on issues like Russia and China. New Delhi, however, has remained steadfast in its insistence on strategic autonomy, refusing to be drawn into what it perceives as another's geopolitical rivalry. This divergence did not happen overnight. For decades, India's foreign policy has been guided by the principle of non-alignment, later evolving into a more pragmatic multi-alignment, where partnerships are cultivated with multiple powers simultaneously. That approach has allowed India to engage deeply with the United States while also maintaining close ties with Russia, participating in groupings like BRICS, and cautiously managing a complex relationship with China. From India's perspective, this is not duplicity but balance. From the U.S. vantage point, however, it increasingly looks like hedging, an unwillingness to fully commit to the American-led order. That perception fuels frustration in Washington, particularly when India continues oil imports from Russia or resists Western sanctions, decisions that U.S. policymakers see as undermining their efforts. At the heart of this erosion of trust is a mismatch in expectations. The U.S. often frames partnerships in terms of alignment with its own global strategy, while India prioritizes sovereignty and independence in decision-making. When the U.S. resorts to punitive measures like tariffs or diplomatic pressure, India interprets it as coercion rather than cooperation. That fuels resentment, reinforcing the belief in New Delhi that reliance on any single partner, no matter how powerful, is dangerous. The fallout is visible not just in economic ties, but also in the tone of political discourse. Indian leaders increasingly speak of equality in partnerships, of mutual respect, and of non-negotiable national interest. These are not just rhetorical flourishes, they are markers of a shift in how India sees itself on the world stage. The divergence is compounded by domestic politics on both sides. In Washington, tough talk on trade and foreign policy plays well with voters skeptical of globalization and wary of rising powers. In India, standing firm against external pressure bolsters national pride and feeds into a long-standing narrative of resisting exploitation by bigger powers. Each side, therefore, is incentivized to take harder positions, even if it means jeopardizing the long-term partnership. What once seemed like a shared vision of a democratic alliance is now tangled in competing political imperatives. The erosion of trust is not simply the result of one tariff or one disagreement. It is the cumulative effect of years of mismatched expectations, economic disputes, and conflicting strategic outlooks. The danger is that what was once called the defining partnership of the 21st century could slip into a transactional relationship defined more by friction than friendship. India's response to the escalating trade and diplomatic tensions has been shaped by a determination to insulate itself from external shocks and assert its own economic and political independence. The sudden doubling of tariffs by the United States was not received in New Delhi as a mere commercial dispute, but as a test of sovereignty. Rather than rushing to compromise, Indian policymakers turned inward and outward at the same time, strengthening domestic initiatives while also seeking new markets abroad. At the center of this response is the renewed emphasis on self-reliance, a philosophy that has deep roots in India's history but is now being reinvented for a globalized 21st century. Campaigns like Make in India and Vocal for Local are not simply slogans. They are tools to redirect national energy toward building resilience, reducing dependency on foreign markets, and protecting jobs in vulnerable industries. The government has actively encouraged consumers to prioritize Indian-made goods over imported products, echoing a call to revive a modern version of the Swadeshi spirit that once fueled India's independence struggle. This is not framed as isolationism, but as a practical necessity in an era when global partners can abruptly weaponize trade. The impact is particularly visible in sectors like textiles, gems, and leather goods, where exporters face declining orders from the U.S. These industries, employing millions of workers, cannot wait indefinitely for Washington's mood to change. Instead, India is redirecting them toward European, African, and Southeast Asian markets, using trade missions and diplomatic outreach to build new supply chains and reduce overexposure to American buyers. Domestically, the push for self-reliance is being reinforced by incentives for manufacturing, subsidies for local production, and efforts to strengthen small and medium enterprises. By boosting local capacity, the government hopes to turn this crisis into a catalyst for long-term reform. Infrastructure upgrades, credit facilities, and digital platforms for small exporters are all part of a larger design to ensure India's industries are less vulnerable to external tariffs and more competitive globally. For policymakers in New Delhi, the tariffs are seen not only as punishment but also as a wake-up call to accelerate reforms that have long been discussed but not fully implemented. The rhetoric around self-reliance also serves a political function. Leaders have framed it as a matter of national pride, urging citizens to see every foreign boycott and every tariff not as a setback but as an opportunity to strengthen the domestic economy. This narrative resonates deeply with the public, especially when connected to India's long history of resisting external domination. By portraying the trade standoff as another chapter in that story, the government turns adversity into motivation, rallying both industry and consumers behind a common cause. At the same time, India has avoided outright confrontation by keeping communication channels open, emphasizing that it remains committed to global trade but on terms that respect its sovereignty. The domestic response, therefore, is not about retreating from globalization, but about engaging with it from a position of greater strength and self-confidence, ensuring that no single foreign power can dictate the boundaries of India's choices. The fallout from the U.S. decision to double tariffs on Indian exports has gone far beyond the realm of economics, spilling into the sensitive domain of geopolitics, where every move reverberates across multiple continents. For years, Washington and New Delhi cultivated a narrative of being natural partners in shaping the global order. That image is now being tested. The tariffs have fueled doubts in India about whether the United States truly sees the partnership as one of equals, or whether it still views India as a subordinate ally expected to comply with its global agenda. In response, India is recalibrating its foreign policy posture, seeking to ensure that no single partner, however powerful, can unilaterally shape its choices. This recalibration carries significant implications for alliances, rivalries, and the balance of power in Asia and beyond. One of the most immediate consequences is India's deepening reliance on its long-standing partnership with Russia. Despite Western objections, India has continued to import discounted Russian oil, arguing that energy security cannot be sacrificed for geopolitical alignment. The tariffs only reinforce India's determination to maintain these energy flows, signaling to Moscow that their partnership remains durable under pressure. Russia, in turn, sees an opportunity to strengthen ties by offering India favorable trade deals and expanded defense cooperation. What Washington perceives as a breach of loyalty, Moscow interprets as validation of its enduring role in South Asia's strategic landscape. China also factors into the equation. While India and China remain strategic competitors with unresolved border disputes, Beijing has quietly welcomed India's friction with Washington. Any crack in U.S. India cooperation eases pressure on China, especially in multilateral groupings like the Quad, which was designed in part to counterbalance Beijing's influence in the Indo-Pacific. Although New Delhi is unlikely to soften its stance toward China, the perception of an unreliable American partner could limit India's willingness to be fully drawn into U.S.-led security frameworks. This divergence benefits Beijing indirectly by complicating Washington's efforts to consolidate its Asian alliances. At the same time, India is broadening its outreach to other players, particularly in Europe and Africa. European leaders, wary of overdependence on both the U.S. and China, see India as an increasingly important partner for trade and security. The strain with Washington accelerates India's willingness to explore comprehensive economic partnerships with the European Union, while also investing diplomatic capital in Africa, where markets are growing and geopolitical competition is fierce. By diversifying its alliances, India reduces its vulnerability to American leverage, while presenting itself as a balancing force in an increasingly multipolar world. The larger geopolitical repercussion lies in the message these tensions send to the global community. Countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America that have long been skeptical of U.S. reliability are watching closely. If Washington can impose punitive measures on India, a democratic partner with decades of goodwill, then no state can assume its relationship with the U.S. is safe from sudden shifts. Conversely, India's refusal to yield signals to the global South that sovereignty and strategic independence are possible even under American pressure. That example could embolden other nations to resist similar demands, complicating Washington's broader foreign policy agenda. In this way, a tariff dispute has evolved into a litmus test of global power dynamics, redefining how nations view both the United States and India as actors on the world stage. In short, what just happened has changed everything. The days when leverage alone shaped U.S. India rapport are over. We are entering an era where diplomacy must be earned, trust must be sustained, and national character must count for something. It's a new chapter, one written not just in treaties but in tariffs, not just in state visits, but in the price paid by ordinary businesses and local producers. So here's the question we must all ask. Will this turning point become the moment two nations reset toward a more equal, respectful alliance, or the moment one alliance begins to fracture because of miscalculations, overreach, and lost trust? Because, make no mistake, from here on, everything has changed.